Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and this is going to be a really important conversation. I think hopefully an inspirational conversation with an old friend of mine, Justin Harvey, who actually we just looked up. Last time we spoke was 5 years ago, if you can believe it, like right before COVID 1984 insanity. And for those who don't know, I will put this in the show notes, encourage you to go back and just learn more about Justin's history. We spent more time in that first interview talking about that Federal Reserve work you've done, work around fluoride, which we're obviously going to talk about today, vaccines, 5G, and then in the 5 years since we had this interview, you've also done quite a bit of work out there in Florida on the whole COVID scam. So yeah, welcome back, brother. How you doing?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man. It's been cool to watch you. You know, we don't always get to see each other in person, but we've known each other for at least a decade, over a decade now through the internet, but getting to hang out in person. But it's always cool to sort of see friends, even if we don't see each other regularly, out there just as passionate as I know I am on different topics. And of course, one of the things that I think we have in common, which I wish there were more people out there, and I hope more people will take inspiration from you, is your on the ground activism. You know, I think that's really what sets apart yourself, myself, and I can think of a few others. It's not a competition, but I do think there's a big difference between people who are just active on the internet, which you are as well, but then who actually go out and, try to confront the local power, whether that's commissioner court or city council or mayors or what have you. So, man, you've just been doing some great work the last years, brother.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's really just been a strategy trying to perfect, like what we are, where we can be out in the streets only so much, right? And then you have to really just kind of navigate that to what's most effective. And that was going into these meetings and speaking at these council meetings, as you've seen.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and dive right into it. I mean, we'll talk. Well, actually, yeah, we'll start with fluoride because it's so timely right now, especially right now as of we're recording this. Just 3-4 days ago, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis signed the Farm Bill, I believe, right, into action, which included banning fluoride. And before we get into some other topics, I would like to talk about the different work you did during COVID, but you have just been traveling around Florida, around your state, right? I mean, you've been doing activism for years under the We Are Change Orlando banner. As I mentioned, vaccines, fluoride, 5G, COVID, Federal Reserve, et cetera. And you've, though, kind of zeroed in and honed in the last year, I would say, on fluoride specifically. And now there's, a state bill that has been passed. And I would argue that the work that you were doing, whether or not that bill was going to pass or not, or whether or not it ever got brought up, that the work that you and others were doing on the local level probably would have made it to the point where Florida would have effectively banned fluoride county by county, city by city at the rate you guys were going. I mean, because how many different areas, localities did you have before this bill went into effect, which effectively banned it? Like you've already been working, traveling the state, and just explain that. What have you been doing exactly? What is that part of your activism involved?
Yeah, so it ended up being a total of 26 Florida communities that voted to remove it before the state bill. And essentially what happened, and like you said, many topics I've covered over the years, but this one really came to a head again when that federal court ruling was laid down. And we actually had momentum that we had never had before. We had the ability to use this federal court ruling, use the Surgeon General from Florida and his guidance to build relationships with our local council members and encourage them to do the right thing. Look at this science, understand that fluoride is forced medication, a neurotoxin, a toxic waste, and take it out of the water. I'm always a big believer in seizing momentum, whether it be a new revelation, a whistleblower, a documentary, a federal court ruling in this case. And that's what we did. I teamed up with Stand for Health Freedom. We hit the ground running. We already have our medical freedom movement or what have you from the vaccines and from COVID. We reached out to locals and said, you need to speak at these city council meetings. We gave them a formula and we really just hit the ground running. Like you said, I couldn't even get my own county, which is, very left leaning and trust the science sort of vibes. I couldn't get them to do anything. So we started working outside of our own cities and counties and going after the places that were more understanding of informed consent and personal choice. And those communities started to do it and remove the fluoride, and it became a domino effect. We had the Surgeon General popping up at certain meetings when he was invited, lending that credibility. It was just crazy because I always liken it to, we used to get laughed out of these rooms and, told, next speaker, please. These people are crazy conspiracy theorists. And now we're showing up and the Florida Surgeon General is there to speak and say the same things that we're saying. So we just had a really unique opportunity in Florida, and being at this so many years and it falling on deaf ears and hitting so many dead ends, I was like, we have the ability to just literally take the ball and run straight to the end zone. And that's really what we did.
Yeah, man, it's been, like I said, it's been really inspiring to watch. So let's talk a little more details about, you're going to different cities and counties and helping local activists get organized. And like you said, giving them a formula to go to speak at the relevant authorities. And obviously you, like myself, know that even in the past when they haven't listened, which has been most of my experience, you're able to get the video footage and then, of course, put that on social media, try to generate more interest, make it go viral. And I know that you've been really good at doing that with your own talks and your own presentations, but, with other people as well. What was it? Was it really easy? I mean, a lot of people know that Florida and places like Texas were a little bit more free than the rest of the U.S. during COVID 1984. And so maybe people are like, well, you're in Florida. It's easy, right? It's, you already got a governor that's speaking about this. But was that your experience, or did you find resistance, along the way? And what did that look like?
Well, we're a big state. We're a diverse state. So it was easy in some places. Some places it only took 2 or 3 people. Some places woke up and took the fluoride out without us even trying to push them to do it. We had a city manager or a utility director just wake up and say, turn the fluoride off. There's new science. Let's save the city some money. So we had a lot of unique situations, but what made it easy was people like RFK Jr. saying something, people like Latipo, our Surgeon General, saying something, issuing guidance, the federal court ruling. Without these things, I don't think it would have been as easy. We go into these meetings and they think it's such a fringe topic. They don't want to stick their neck out on. Even with this ammo that we had, this new information, we still had people scared to stick their neck out on something controversial. So imagine what it was like before the court ruling. It was like, no way, no one would touch this with a 10-foot pole. It was like trying to talk about vaccines before COVID. So I give credit to those things, whether it be RFK, Latipo, the court ruling, and also just this post-COVID world. I can't tell you how many council members and mayors were like, oh, wow, forced medication is what fluoride is. Didn't we just go through this, through the pandemic? So a light bulb has gone off of what exactly fluoride is, like I said, in the post-COVID world. So that's been helpful. But, Florida we really did step up, and we had people really showing up at these meetings and, speaking on fluoride, some of them looking into it for over a decade. So that really did help, people stepping up.
You said that some of the cities decided, or counties or towns decided to just stop doing the fluoride on their own. But in the ones where that wasn't the case, where it did take people showing up to meetings, what did that look like? Was the goal to get them to introduce a local resolution saying we're going to stop fluoridating, or like, were you attacking the budgets, or were you guys kind of taking a, anything you can do approach, or, what were the specific strategies?
Yeah, it really just, you played everyone different. You kind of just went in. If you have a connection to a council member, maybe somebody's uncle works on the council, there's your in. I noticed that even if you couldn't get them with the science, which there is plenty of science to show that there's potential harm, a lot of them you could fall back on the informed consent and freedom to choose. So we had, like, for instance, Democrat left-leaning council members that in the end, I would say, look, man, I get it. Like, you think it's safe. We think it's not safe. We can line up doctors and dentists and studies on both sides. But at the end of the day, you can't force it on people that don't want it, right? And they're like, oh, wow, you have a really good point there. So there is a really strong point to be made about the freedom to choose. And that really hooked people. So that was a lot of our strategy, was also building these relationships before the vote came. If there's one tip I'll give people, is the wins come before the meeting. So you don't want to go into a meeting and hammer them with calls and emails, and then they finally put it on the agenda and you have no idea how they're going to vote. Maybe 4 of the council members love fluoride and only one of them doesn't like it. And if you don't know that, they may go in and vote it out, or vote it down, in essence, keeping the fluoride. So you've just kind of lost your chance, and that boat has sailed for a while. So you've got to be very strategic about it. You want to build those relationships early on and try to understand that you have the win before the meeting even comes, before the official vote.
Those are really, really useful tips and strategies there. And, I was one of the only, I think there was only one other journalist at the fluoride trial at the courtroom in San Francisco last year. Brenda Belletti of CHD. Other than that, it was me. The only time there wasn't even, Associated Press, Reuters, any sort of mainstream for the entire 2 weeks. And I remember telling people, because, maybe you've seen this, man. Some people in our crowd are kind of jaded. So like, of course, we all know fluoride's bad. Who cares if there's this they're kind of like black pilled in a way. They're sort of like, it's no big deal. But when the case happened and when the National Toxicology Report came out, and I'm doing super detailed reporting way beyond what the mainstream did, and like showing people like, hey, here's the leaked emails, here's all this different stuff. My argument always was that these are tools that we can use. Yes, okay, you feel like this, and you of course fluoride's bad for you. But for the people who haven't been willing to listen to you in the past, whether that's council members, commissioner court, or just your friends and family, here you go. You can point and say, look, there's a federal court that has now said that this is, a risk to lowering IQ in children. And we also have this government report. Like, I think sometimes those who are just watching the show online and maybe aren't activists so much, or at least don't see themselves in that way, sort of lose sight of the fact that when we do get new bits of information, it can be an effective tool in the exact way that you've used it. You've taken, okay, we have this ruling now let's turn around and just start hitting up as many cities with this new information that we have, and taking, okay, we'll take the scientific argument if they're willing to listen, the health argument. We'll take, the bodily autonomy argument. We'll take a financial waste. I know that that's the sort of thing I was trying in Houston. And I shared with you recently that I found out through open records requests that Houston is actually not fluoridating and hasn't been for, it appears, 5 years. And there's still some things that they appear to be hiding from me, like weird things like the levels of fluoride have definitely gone down, allegedly to only naturally occurring fluoride levels, which is in Houston's water. But they actually still signed like a $5 million contract for fluoridation chemicals about 2 years ago.
Wow.
And so I'm trying, and I have an open records request about that. I asked for all emails related. This company, I know you're familiar with Mosaic. This is another company that they're called Penco. I hadn't heard of them until recently. And so I found that there was a contract with the city of Houston and Penco for fluoridation chemicals like 2 or 3 years ago, after the fluoride levels started going down, and they haven't gone back up. And so there's this $5 million contract on the record, signed, approved by city council, but there's no fluoride being added to the water. So I don't know if I stepped into a whole nother scandal or something else weird, but now the city is appealing, and they basically have got the state attorney general to deny at least parts of my request. But I'm waiting to get more details because I've been trying to suss it out. But my point is, like, I've been in those trenches in the same ways that you have been, and I've had the kind of meetings you're describing where they don't want to listen, and where you do, you spend a lot of time and energy, but it's just such I think a positive success story to see something like what you've been doing, with or without Ron DeSantis coming along and signing the federal, the state ban. You were already, you and your crew, and is Stand for Health Freedom, is that Sayer G, is he involved in that one? Is that what that organization?
Yeah, he's one of the, I believe, co-founders or whatever, Dr. Joel, Sayer, and some other individuals. Yeah, but that's exactly the angles that we were going to, and not so much that the budget would work as much. I used to think that in the beginning too, is we could get them with the budget, but sometimes they're paying a fraction of what you think they are. They may be getting it from China. It's just not really ever the angle that worked. But I will tell you, when you point to what exactly the fluoride was, we had one of the mayors in one of the first communities that we were doing it with. He went down to the water department and he said, when I realized that I had to stand back and couldn't get too close because it was actually eating through the metal in the equipment room, it was like a light bulb went off. And that, that big misconception of it being naturally occurring fluoride, it's not. It's a chemical waste, an industrial neurotoxic chemical waste. And, I was shocked at how many council members, mayors, public that have no idea that that's what it actually is that they add to water. So that was another great angle. And yeah, you got to encourage people. Don't wait for government. We saw the rumblings with RFK, and, Latipo was doing great things, but you've got to go out there and do it yourself. If this state bill were to ever fail or get overturned, we have it on the books in 26 local communities. And it's very difficult to put that back in. Not only has that, fluoride propaganda train sailed many decades ago with the boomer generation, but they sent out lots of grant money to put these fluoridation systems in these small communities. And all that grant money is gone. It's dried up. The truth is starting to come out about the topic. So for them to put it back in any of those communities would be almost impossible. So I encourage people, go city by city, county by county, especially if you can't get the state, on the first shot.
Yeah, talk a little bit about some of the resistance that you guys had, because again, having gone to city council for years, you don't even, people might be surprised by this. Like, you don't have to be hundreds of people showing up at city council. You can just be a handful of people. And then groups like the American Dental Association start sending out their lackeys to try to like, oh, these people don't know what they're talking about. They're not dentists, this and that. And so the fluoride lobby is fairly organized, from the fluoridation groups like what's Johnny Johnson's called?
The American Fluoridation Society.
American Fluoridation Society, the American Dental Association itself, and then of course government agencies. But yeah, I mean, people might not be as aware because it's kind of a very niche issue, but there's definitely people who are following all the fluoride fights and who will actively show up and try to just, crap on any testimony from regular people if they're not dentists or, medical professionals, et cetera. So talk about some of that. I know you guys got resistance in different cities you were visiting.
Yeah, so while we got 26 to remove it, we had about 8 that voted to keep it. And some of them were big shockers. We thought we had the votes in the bag, and then come voting day, they would just vote the other way. And a lot of that had to do with that dental propaganda. These groups sent an individual out named Dr. Johnny Johnson, like you mentioned, president of the Fluoridation Society, I'm sure an unbiased individual, right? President of the fluoride group, and was really just hammering these council members with the same old talking points, scaring them to death, basically, that if they stopped, that the poor kids' teeth were going to fall out and all these bad things were going to happen. And as we all know, I'm sure many of your listeners do, that most of the world, 95% of it, does not fluoridate their water. 40 plus counties in Florida don't. Like, we don't have a dental crisis. So it was these unfounded fears and this speaking from a place of authority, using the ADA, the CDC, and all these groups to basically say, we support fluoridation, it's safe, it's been helping underserved, communities, and it would scare them into keeping fluoridation. So it was really something, it wasn't so much, maybe some are getting paid off, sure, but a lot of times it was just decades of indoctrination and fear of doing something, new and controversial that they weren't educated about. But I will say it backfired at times, because while he's fire hosing them with all the propaganda, we're fire hosing them with all the new information. And eventually they go, oh my gosh, this is just too much. Throw my hands up. I just got to give people the choice. There's plenty of ways to get fluoride. So that was our saving grace, because a lot of people would fall back on that, Wow. But like you mentioned, that opposition group, he showed up one time with a bus of 30 plus dentists from a nearby convention. And it didn't work out very well. The commission was not happy to see all these out-of-state dentists trying to persuade them. They got a little mouthy in the room. One of them had to be, kind of looked at as he yelled and stormed out by the police. It was just not a good scene. I had commissioners reaching out to me asking, who were those people? That was very inappropriate. They had made their decision, and they listened to local residents. Fortunately, not these ADA shills that were sent in.
Yeah, I remember seeing you post that, and not only was that hilarious, and I mean that in the sense of like, if you like, I don't know, just in a very real sense, this guy is being paid to be a propagandist for fluoride. There's no way, in my mind, there's no way this guy isn't capable of seeing the same information that we're seeing. And on one hand, like you said earlier, I realized long ago, especially during COVID 1984, that, the quote unquote other side, they have their experts, they have their studies, and those they lean on those. Yeah. And then, quote unquote, our side has our doctors and our experts and our studies. And it's just, people are going to choose their sides. Unfortunately, it just seems like that's kind of the world we're in now. Somebody like that clearly has such a strong bias. And I think, I'm not going to speculate. It could be financial motive. It could be other things. But I think also some people just marry themselves to ideas, and it becomes part of their identity, and they don't want to let go of that. They don't want to be wrong. And especially in the case of like, if you aren't, like, assuming best case scenario that somebody's not just a malicious actor who consciously is doing something they know is and saying that, it's fine when they know it's going to harm people, then to go past that cognitive dissonance that we know about, that is always a struggle when you're really reaching anybody, for them to finally kind of open that idea and be like, okay, maybe everything I've been doing my whole life has been wrong. Maybe I've been teaching people something that is horrible for them is actually okay. I think that's just a really hard thing for anybody to do. So, but nevertheless, it's good to see those people get that reality that, like you said, like maybe they think they could just come in with all these facts, and instead it ends up pushing people towards the realization that the science isn't as clear, let's say, at least as they want to believe, that they want it to be like, no, there's, just like with vaccines, there's no question. We all know these are safe. Anybody saying so is stupid. Once they can't convince the council or whoever of that, and then, like you said, you're able to present the argument that, well, shouldn't you just be giving people a choice anyways? I think that's a great strategy to try to push people in that direction.
Yeah, and you can't really. What I don't understand is their big thing is oh, we've got to keep doing this or the poor kids' teeth will rot, right? But there are 30% or whatever of the state was on well water for many decades, and they were never advocating for these communities to get fluoride. So it's like they care so much about the kids, but only in the places we're trying to take it out. All the kids that have never had it, they just go about their business. So it's just very clear that this is not about the children. This is about them holding on to a narrative, like you said, and an industry.
Yeah, and it makes it clear in my mind that folks like Johnny Johnson and others realize that they're losing the propaganda battle, and that if one county or one city says we're not going to get fluoride and do fluoride anymore, then that has a ripple effect. And that's something that I'm hoping, as the word gets out more and more, that a place as big as Houston, even though it didn't come in the same way, where there has been an active movement of us out there trying to do it. But in this case, it just seems like I still haven't been able to get anybody explain to me exactly why they stopped. There's no records of it. I've got thousands of emails I'm still going through, but I haven't found anything that said on this day we're terminating the program. It just seems like it was a quiet decision made and the public was never notified. And I think it could have come under the budgetary concerns we were talking about earlier, because Houston, like many cities, is in millions of dollars in debt. It's there definitely been for years warning about this fiscal cliff on the local level. And even when I was running for mayor in 2019 and 2023 of Houston to try to talk about these topics, one of the things I was saying is, instead of spending $1 million a year on fluoride, why don't we save that money and put it somewhere better? And the funny thing is, apparently that whole time there was no fluoride in the water and nobody bothered saying anything. It's like they didn't want it to become an issue. I kind of feel like that they figured let's just let it go away and maybe nobody will notice.
Exactly. And I ran into the same thing. I found 5 or so municipalities in Florida that, again, had quietly stopped fluoridating either a year, 2 years ago, and they didn't tell anyone. Sometimes the mayor and council members didn't even know. So, I agree. They're probably trying to save face, because once you open that can of worms, they go, okay, where'd the money go? Why didn't you tell us? What else are you hiding? So I think they're just like, crap, let's just, or maybe in our case, it was people were like, hey, listen, we really don't want to do this anymore. Let's just turn it off till someone notices, And
even it was kind of my slight concern when I was diving into the story and I started to suspect that there was no fluoride in Houston's water. I was actually talking to some mutual friends of ours, who are in the fluoride fight, and asking their opinion and their advice. And, a couple of people were like, be careful, not saying don't put the truth out there if that's what you find, but sort of warning that in the climate we're in now, some people, like the opposition, the pro-fluoride crowd, might just embrace it so hard that they're demanding we need the fluoride back in the water once they find out.
That's true.
It hasn't happened so far. Well, I want to ask you about that before we move on to another topic real quick. What has been your experience? I know that you are somebody that has been supportive of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the MAHA movement in general, but also, as I said, you've been doing this work before that was even a thing. So, you've been at it for a while, but do you think that the fights over fluoride, over vaccines, and these different, quote unquote conspiracy theories, do you think the fights have changed in any way with the association, whether, positive or negative, of Trump and RFK? What I mean by that is that in some cases I've noticed just in the last year that now, because they have become associated, or at least in the mainstream, people associate, these sort of things with Trump administration. So let's say somebody has a negative thought about Trump or RFK and they hear you discuss this topic, then they try to associate you with that movement. You know what I mean? I feel like there's more of that now going on, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've run into that, in my early speeches on the fluoride, I would mention, Latipo, DeSantis, Kennedy, trying to give it that official capacity, these official people are against it. Well, eventually they would just roll their eyes, because anything fluoride, it was just like COVID. It became politicized. So anything like medical freedom, vaccine, fluoride related was seen as a right-wing Trump. It was just, so I stopped mentioning Kennedy. I even stopped mentioning Latipo at times, because they were like, oh, he's just a DeSantis appointee. It's like, what? he's a Harvard-educated medical doctor. Like, it would have been just this like super credible doctor until he got appointed by DeSantis. So it's made it difficult because it's so politicized. I feel I am like grateful and hopeful for the things that come with sort of this Maha stuff. Like, most of Trump's appointments and a lot of the stuff is business as usual, right? But I've seen council members change their tune because of RFK making one tweet about fluoride. So if he's going to help the CDC and EPA stop recommending it, if he's going to, change the way vaccines are studied, if he's going to like really upend some of these things we've been fighting for years as far as chemical toxicity, GMOs, vaccines, 5G, fluoride, chemtrails, I'm all for it. Whatever he can do from that position to try to push these, I'm just going to take the good from it. Some people think it's all a show. Some people think they're giving us small wins because there's worse things coming. I'm just trying to get the poisons out of our world, and I'll use those tools as they come. It was kind of like when DeSantis was speaking up about vaccines, I was posting more of DeSantis's announcements. People are like, oh, are you a big DeSantis fan now? Not at all. But if he's going to promote our cause, I'm going to use that to get publicity, to work the issue and do what we did. Same thing with fluoride and RFK. I've got plenty of disagreements with him, but I'm very grateful for like the attention they're putting on these issues.
Yeah. So it's not so much about like supporting or endorsing these people, but trying to use it in kind of a strategic and tactical way of like, this might give more weight to the opinion into certain people's minds, and
Exactly.
So I'm going to play on that. Yeah. And, one other question on that aspect, because I have been kind of super skeptical of Kennedy for a number of reasons, largely, I would say, for his Zionism and, some questions around the Epstein connection. But yes, as you said, there's been some announcements that he has made that I would say are generally good or better than they have been. And then there's, of course, other things of like speaking pretty, I think, affirmatively and positively of the MMR vaccine and the measles vaccine, and then the FDA under Trump like approving mRNAs for bird flu and just different things like that. That to me, I'm still like, okay, I think there might be some co-opting going on. We'll see, right? But what is your general opinion on that? Like again, since I'm kind of an outside observer, obviously somebody who cares about those issues, but I wouldn't necessarily say I'm part of or been a part of a Maha movement, but I've seen different kind of factions forming. And it reminds me of the different movements we've seen over the years, man, like the 9/11 Truth Movement, the Liberty Movement, whatever, or even I'd say some people who are more left leaning during the Bernie years, they got excited about Bernie, and then there's a movement built around a person. It doesn't happen. And then it kind of, you end up where there's more radical folks. And then there's those who are like, we got to go mainstream and start a political party. I kind of see the same thing happening with Maha, where there's people like Dr. Jack Cruz and Dr. Mary Bowden and others saying like Casey Means is a bad pick at Surgeon General, just different things like that, right? And the sort of more radical elements who are like, why are you not calling for banning the COVID vaccines right now? Like, what the heck is going on? Every day more people are being injured. And others who are like, hold on, we got to let's work on the food dyes. Let's do on these things. Like, obviously those things can still be good, but yeah, where would you say you kind of fall on that spectrum, or, how do you see the movement right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been kind of watching that play out too. I'm more of like a glass half full, kind of optimistic, very hopeful person. I try to see the good in people. I'm optimistic about RFK and what he can bring to the health stuff. I obviously don't like his stance on Israel like you, but I think it's really tough to say. It's not a black and white answer because there's so much corruption and confusion, right? None of us really know how it works. So it's like we can spend all day speculating on if Trump's really in control, if Kennedy's really in control, how much are they been sellouts the whole time? Are they slightly controlled? Are they being told just to shut up on this? And I think most of the time we're just like kind of arguing about another person's intentions we've never met, or how we would do it if we were in there. Oh, I'd ban them on day one. Well, I actually agree with that too. But the more I've learned and the more I've gotten, closer to DeSantis or Latipo or Kennedy, I've sort of seen a little more how it works. And I know just even describing this sounds like I'm going into 5D chess, but from my understanding, what they're doing, genuine people in politics have learned it is a game. And it's like this game, this strategy, this chess. And if they don't play it right, they lose all opportunity to do any good. So like Kennedy, for instance, he probably told himself, I've got to tell Cassidy up in that hearing, at that confirmation hearing, that vaccines are safe. Everyone's going to eat me alive for it, especially the OGs in the game. but I've got to say that to get the job. And then I'll go in there and upend the whole system. And I think that's what may be happening. I hope I'm right. I could be wrong. I don't think he's some total sellout trickster that's just in there to do something else. He's not perfect by any stretch, but I really hope that's what the case is. I don't think Trump even is educated about these topics. I think he saw Kennedy as a way to help him get elected, and he's probably like, yeah, health is great. People seem to love this guy, but I don't think it goes too much deeper than that with Trump. He's controlled, but he's just I just don't think he knows these topics in depth. You listen to him talk on the Rogan podcast, and he's like, it's like the guy's never uttered the words glyphosate, fluoride, geoengineering, never had discussions about them. He was still promoting the COVID vaccine, and I think he does that arrogantly, thinking it actually still is good. So it's a little long-winded, but I really hope that's what the case is for Kennedy.
Yeah, man, I wish I could fully share in your optimism. I appreciate the optimism because I definitely don't consider myself black-pilled at all, but obviously super skeptical of it. And I think you would say that, you're going to remain skeptical too, and just you have high hopes, but I know that you're the kind of principled person that is ready to call out corruption wherever it comes from, and that's why I appreciate what you do. One other real quick question: are you familiar with? Have you seen either my reporting or Whitney Webb's reporting on Jim O'Neill, the dude who was just recently nominated and approved for deputy secretary at HHS? He's under Kennedy, and sort of one of Whitney's claims, and I think it's a fair argument. You start looking into this Jim O'Neill guy, and he's worked for the Thiel Fellowship and the Thiel Foundation, and worked for a couple of Peter Thiel's companies. And Peter Thiel, of course, is steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group. I worry that even if RFK is, let's say he's 100% the saint that some people think he is, and he's going to try to do his very best, that there are people like that in place who, whether they realize it or not, might have a completely different agenda.
Yeah, like they're gatekeeper sort of in the position or in the area. Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen that reporting particularly, but I've heard his name, but I need to look into him more. I don't know enough about him.
Yeah, I'll send you some stuff. He said during his nomination, he said, vaccines have saved millions of lives. I'm actually I'm a vaccine advisor, and just total. Yeah.
I guess the devil's advocate position is that they may be selecting people that appear totally on the front facing pro all the mainstream things. Like, for instance, they try to throw up Latipo and they're going to kick him to the curb for CDC or Surgeon General, right? Because he's too openly anti-vax and anti-fluoride. So they sneak Kennedy in there, but he's got to pick people that seemingly are pro all these things, like a Marty Makary or a Jay Bhattacharya. They've never called out vaccines and autism or fluoride. So they're like safe bets. It's almost like we've got to pick these people that just woke up during COVID. You can almost make that argument for Callie and Casey Means. It's like they're safe bets, and that's why they don't want to talk about pulling the COVID jabs yet, because they think they're playing this game of chess of where, well, we'll talk about that, but let's get these things done first before we screw all this up. And some people do not agree with that, but maybe the way you get it done is not going in there guns blazing. But I will say, just to end on that, what you all do, like you and Whitney and even Mary, by holding their feet to the fire and being super skeptical, I think is more than necessary, because we've got to have all those people demanding they explain these things in real time. We have that ability now with the internet, with Twitter. You can actually call these people out, and if it gets enough, you can ratio them in the comments to where they have to make a statement the following day. So I think we have to just keep doing that, to be double and triple checking that we're not getting psyoped again. We're not getting some smoke screen and throwing a bone here while they take away our free speech there and whatnot.
Absolutely. I showed you this article I just published the other day at Last American Vagabond, and we don't have to get really deep into it, but because we were talking about the fluoride lawsuit, and just for those who hadn't seen this, at the end of 2024, so in September, Judge Edward Chen, as Justin mentioned earlier, ruled in favor of the Fluoride Action Network and the plaintiffs, and against the EPA, saying that fluoride was posing an unreasonable risk to human health, mainly focused on lowering IQ in children. And under the Toxic Substance Control Act, the EPA was now forced to take some action. The judge didn't say what they had to do. He just said, you need to initiate rulemaking. And obviously the most hope the most wise thing is just ban the whole thing together. But at the very least, they're supposed to do something, whether that means, okay, we're going to lower it from 0.07 to whatever, or, something. And right at the last couple of days of the Biden administration, Biden's EPA issued an appeal of it, which we kind of expected. And then there was a question, and I know that, for example, Michael Connett with the Fluoride Action Network, who's quoted in this article, and other folks with the Fluoride Action Network, and just kind of the fluoride-free community in general, and again, the MAHA movement, were hopeful that, okay, well, Trump's coming into office, RFK, et cetera, so they're going to turn around and they'll just get rid of the appeal and stop that appeal. But as my reporting here shows, and it links to the court records where the lawyer with the Department of Justice who's representing Trump's EPA says we need more time. They've now requested 2 extensions from March to April, then April to May, and now it's like June 11th they have to make a decision by then if they're going to either continue with the appeal and then thus file their paperwork doing so, or rescind the appeal. And Michael Connett, who I know you know as well, Justin, he pretty boldly and just directly said to me, I'll just read his exact words here. He said, "What we need the EPA to do is to follow the court's order from last year, where the court ordered the EPA to implement a rulemaking proceeding to eliminate the unreasonable risk posed by adding fluoridation chemicals to drinking water. The court didn't ask the EPA to do another review of the science. The court ordered the EPA to take action." And his reference to a review is because Kennedy had done a press conference in Utah whenever Utah did their ban, and said, him and Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, said, we're going to do another review. We're going to start doing some action. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, that definitely worries me. I'll say that. I mean, we've got like another couple weeks now, so we'll give them time to see. But even the fact that they say they need 2 or 3 months to review the record to see if they want to, appeal it, seems that there's some doubt in their mind as to whether all of the data that Michael Connett and his team have been presenting over the last 8-9 years is to be believed or not. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't know what to make of it, honestly. I hope that everything else is going the other direction, right? I mean, he's congratulating states on banning it. We're talking about having the CDC stop recommending it, the EPA change their guidelines. So I don't know, everything would go in line with them, getting rid of this lawsuit, not continuing to appeal. The only thing I can think of is, just speculating, is maybe strategically they're waiting to like, I don't know, prepare or look at other information, or maybe they're just not ready to, I don't know, end it in the way that they're supposed to. So they're just buying time. I don't know. It's really strange. Hopefully they make an announcement themselves soon, because like you said, Connett and these guys all seem to be on the same page. So why would you stall, that process out any longer?
And then the other thing is that when they did have that press conference I just mentioned, where they announced Zeldin and Kennedy announced they were going to tell the CDC to stop recommending it, and they were celebrating the Utah win. They didn't even mention the lawsuit at all. That's the thing, is like Kennedy has mentioned the lawsuit in the past before he was in office, but I haven't seen any public mention of it. The Trump administration hasn't said anything about it. Obviously in court, they're filing paperwork saying, hey, we need more time to review this. So yeah, I'll keep reporting on that, and hopefully that doesn't turn out to be the opposite. Because I share Michael Connett's opinion that if it ends up being where they're like, well, okay, we need some additional reviews because that was done under the Biden administration or something like that, then it's just kicking the can further down the road when we already have all the data we need. And I was in that courtroom. Exactly. They presented more than enough data. They presented expert witness after expert witness, and the judge was convinced. And the NTP, the National Toxicology Program, their report came out last year, which was delayed multiple times over several years, and it's like a 10-year plus report, one of the most extensive reports done by the U.S. government on fluoride. So yeah, it would be disappointing to see like, oh, we're gonna just do another review.
That exact report a lot, the NTP report he does.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the report's mentioned, but not the lawsuit. So anyways, we'll see where that goes, and we'll keep some eyes on that. But I'll let you go in just a moment. Just one more question, brother. I did want to give you a chance, just because you've done so much good work, man, over the years, that and I would just encourage anybody to go follow you. I'll put the links below, of course, but you were doing so much good work in your activism around COVID-1984 and the vaccines, and before COVID, but especially during COVID. And one of the things I appreciate when I see your social media posts and such is that there's often like a theatrical element to it. I'll say, like, with the elephant in the room, or with just like even just simple things like color coordinating certain signs or clothes, just different things that I think do have like a pretty solid visual impact to people. And you've been to like outside the Super Bowl and other big events and racing events. Talk about some of that, like some of the strategies and things you were putting into practice during COVID. And obviously we know there was pushback and resistance then, but yeah, what were some of the highlights or some of the successes you felt that you experienced during COVID 1984?
Yeah, it's a good question. We thank the censorship for pushing us to the streets more. While we were all getting censored online, we were forced out. Shout out to Joshua Coleman, who created those signs and that campaign. But we basically made the protests more creative, more eye-catching. So the media, New York Times wants to take a big, nice picture. We put very factual statements about vaccines on signs and dressed up as the pit crew and went to the Daytona 500 and hung out front, or dressed up as referees at the Daytona 500. This was before COVID, and during, we're trying to raise awareness about vaccines still. So we really needed a big marketing campaign. So if we can't post online, we crashed the biggest events in the country: Super Bowl, Daytona 500, Oprah speaking events, basketball games, and just educate as many people as we can, get media attention. And it was really successful at that. And that just, rippled out into billboards, highway banners, airplane messages over the beach. And it was all great timing because we were doing this, like I said, right before COVID, and we just kept doing it more and more COVID vaccine focused. And once that awareness campaign was over, it was like, okay, now everyone's talking about the vaccines. Everyone's talking about this. Then we just moved ourselves inside the building, and started speaking at the city council meetings. And I realized that's where we had even more of an effect. So there's a piece to the puzzle. Every piece has its place, from the protesting to the speaking at the council meetings, to the posting on social media, to emailing your local council members and educating them. You just got to strategically do a little bit of all of it. And I tell people, if you keep it creative, keep it consistent, respectful and factual, it's very hard for them to call you crazy or not listen to you. So just stay on them.
Yeah. And again, I mean, it's always just great seeing all the different work you're doing and seeing the impact it has had. And I would definitely second what you just said there, because I've done all of those sides of activism, and I know that not everybody is going to be the type to want to do that, but some of us feel called to, like, whatever's going to work, I'm going to try it. Right. So that might be going to city council. That might be passing out some flyers, or back in the day it was passing out DVDs, holding the protest signs, doing the political confrontations when necessary, doing man on the street stuff. Like, find what works for you, because it's all valuable. Like you said, it all has a place. And in some cases, I've had situations where we've had successes without having to even lobby council members. Like in the case of kicking the TSA off the Houston buses more than a decade ago, that was just people power organizing, showing up at the bus company Metro's meeting and getting them afraid, and then them voluntarily shutting down. And I've also had successes where we did have to go do sit downs and did have to meet with council members and play that game. And then also there's other times where it feels like, you got to block the street, or you got to do a sit-in. And, there's other times where people feel like things need to escalate. I think it all can have a place and a role. And obviously you were also there at Standing Rock as well. So, we've seen just lots of different forms of activism, man, over the years. It's crazy. When did you get started with your work anyways? I mean, it has been a decade by now.
Yeah, it's been a decade. I woke up in 2012, but I really got, active the following year in 2013.
Awesome, brother. Well, thank you for everything that you're doing, man. And I look forward to continuing, because I know that you were already a passionate person when we first met, but now you have, a family to take care of and look out for. So I know that's even more of your driving force and your passions and everything like that. What's the best place for everybody to follow you? I'll put a link to your Instagram, and I know you have a We Are Change Orlando Telegram channel. Is there any other places?
Yeah, I'm also pretty active on Twitter, Justin_We Are Change. That's the same handle on Instagram. Telegram and Facebook, We Are Change Orlando. And if you want to find me on Facebook, my activist account is Justin Robert, not Justin Harvey.
Okay, cool. I'll put all those links in there, brother. And thank you again for all the work you've been doing in Florida, man. Congratulations. I hope you take a little bit of a brief respite to soak that all up and enjoy it, and then, move on to the next battle as it comes on. But I'm happy to know that you're out there, man, doing the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, man. And just the last thing to mention is StandForHealthFreedom.com, the group I was working with. we're creating a template for other states and other communities to do what we did in Florida with fluoride, so that you can just take what we did and just recreate it and do and hopefully create this ripple effect across the country. So check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely send that over to me and I'll put that in the show notes as well. All right, guys, you've heard lots and lots of ideas and tips and hopefully a little bit of inspiration from Justin, who's been at this for over a decade now. And if you can see how other people are successful, if you feel so called, which I hope you will, to get involved in your local community, that's how you're going to see real change. We can't sit around and wait for the federal government to save us, or the United Nations to save us, or anybody else to save us. So take inspiration from Justin, start getting active in your area. And until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with my friend Justin Harvey. Please do check out all his work because he's just doing such good things out there in the world. And use his ideas, his tips that he shared so that you can actually maybe get rid of fluoride in your water or whatever your favorite issue is. I also wanted to point out this book. It's called Something in the Water. Sorry if the lighting's bad. Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation in Your Town by my friend Clint Grice. Sorry, Clint. And I met him actually in San Francisco at the fluoride trial, a great guy who's just been out there fighting, to get rid of fluoride in the water. And the book says here, it says he spent 5 years interviewing the world's leading experts and advocates in the fight against water fluoridation and gained extensive knowledge of the history, science, and politics of this misguided policy. So this book is just like tips and ideas and things that he gleaned from interviews with these different experts and fluoride-free warriors. This is not a paid promotion. I just happen to have this on my bookshelf when I thought about it. Clint gave it to me last year. And so, yeah, check it out. Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation in Your Town. I'll put that in the show notes as well. All right, guys, thanks.